Hi, welcome to today's Law Awareness Week at CDC 2020, The Law and Me, Stronger Together, organized by Law Society Pro Bono Services and the 5 Community Development Councils, supported by the People's Association, National University of Singapore Faculty of Law, Singapore Management University School of Law, Singapore University of Social Sciences, and the Singapore Corporate Counsel Association. I'm Abigail, your host for today's webinar on small businesses in a crisis. With us today are panelists, Mr. Mustafa Rashid and Mr. Samuel Yuan. Mustafa is a project head with the SME Center, and aside from his advisory work with SMEs and startups, he heads outreach and partnerships, delivering speaking engagements and clinics at various forums, incubators, accelerators, and co-working spaces. Aside from his work, he is also an active volunteer, contributing his expertise to various committees in Singapore. Samuel is the managing director of Yuan Law. He has a reputation for being able to professionally straddle the complexities of commercial transactions and the intricacies of intellectual property laws. His sharp business acumen and a mastery of the law has allowed him to provide innovative and cost-effective solutions to his clients. Samuel is a firm supporter of startups and believes them to be vital to the Singaporean economy. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail.
Thanks. Just some housekeeping matters before we get started. Relevant materials for today's talk can be downloaded from the handout section, which you can see on your screen. If you are using a mobile phone or tablet, the icons should appear on your top right-hand corner. On your computer, you should see the icons on the right. Please download these useful materials before the end of the talk. Feel free to ask any questions during the webinar. You can type them into the questions section and click send. Your questions will only be seen by the organizer. We will do our best to address them during the discussions or at the FAQ sessions at the end. Please note that the discussion and any material provided in this webinar is not intended to substitute or constitute as professional legal advice. You should consult a lawyer if you require specific legal advice. All right, with that done, let's get right into the discussion. So just to provide a recap of the COVID-19 Temporary Measures, Rental and Related Measures Act. The economic repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic are far-reaching. Many of you are facing unprecedented challenges, such as significant loss of income, lack of manpower, landlord and tenant issues, as well as contractual disputes. Today, what we hope to achieve is to give you a clearer understanding of the measures the government has introduced to help you tide over this trying period and address some commonly asked questions regarding these schemes. Samuel, Mustafa, would you care to share the recap with our audience, please?
Yeah, thank you, Abby. Mustafa, if I may, I'll just start off this section.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, in case everyone wondering, I'm not Mustafa, I'm Samuel. Yeah, just in case. Okay, so when we talk about what the government is doing to protect businesses and employees in Singapore, we cannot run away from talking about the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. And of course, you know, in common law and as well as in statutory law, there are provisions which seeks to protect the employee as well as businesses from one another. Yeah, but let us focus on the COVID-19 because this is truly a extraordinary creature from a legal perspective. So the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act, of course, we know came into effect earlier this year, and it seeks to offer temporary relief to businesses and individuals who are unable to perform their contractual obligations, which fall due on or after the 1st of February this year because of COVID-19, understandably. So these contracts, however, may be entered into after the 1st of February, but no later than the 25th of March, 2020. So these are key dates, okay? 25th of March, 25th March, key date, all right? Now, what the COVID-19 Act sees, tries to do, okay, is really to put up a stay of execution. A stay of execution such that businesses and individuals do not have to perform because they can't, right? So that there is that state of execution there. Now, along the way, of course, in June this year, the first set of amendments were made, which provides a rental relief framework for small and medium enterprises and to enhance the reliefs that were already made available to businesses, organizations, and individuals who were unable to fulfill their contractual obligations because of COVID-19. And there was a cap that was introduced, and this is significant, a cap on late payment interest or charges for specific contracts, and provides relief for certain parties affected by breaches or delays in construction or supply contracts. Okay, and but only where such breaches and delay is due to COVID-19. In other words, you still have to prove that it's COVID-19 related. Now, later on in September this year, the Act was again amended to allow for an expansion of the powers of rental relief assessors who can, and it also clarifies the interaction between Part 8 of the Act and other dispute resolution proceedings, enhancing the certainty of all these alternative meeting arrangements. Yeah. So, as you can see, the government is trying to fine-tune and to tweak the Act such that it becomes relevant and effective in helping us arrest the economic situation. And this is a bit of an akan datang situation. For those of you who may not know, today an Act was introduced in Parliament, or rather, sorry, a bill was introduced in Parliament, which seeks to bring about a third round of amendments. Tomorrow they will have a second sitting for it, and in all likelihood, if it passes, we'll know by tomorrow, and it will be effective. Yeah. So we will talk about that much later because it's a very new development. Thank you, Abigail. That's all I have to share for now.
Thanks, Samuel. Mustafa, would you like to add on?
Sure. So first and foremost, there's the rental relief framework, which is broken down into like two different categories, I could say. There's the rental relief for the shops, and then there's the rental relief for the industrial and office spaces. It's 2 months plus 2 months for the shops. The second 2 months being supported by the landlord. Of course, if you can meet certain criteria and show proof of that, then you're eligible for the second 2 months. And for offices and industrial properties, there's the 1 month plus the 1 month. The second additional one being if you can meet that criteria also. Other than that, there's a couple of other things in the first half of the year. The PSG grant also saw an addition of things like laptops, remote working tools, temperature screening tools. Also, they increased the support range up to 80% for this grant. The enterprise development grant also saw an addition of up to 80% for things like consulting, automation, and overseas expansion. Lastly, the market readiness assistance grant, which has been around for a long time and a lot of businesses use it. The percentage of assistance stayed at 70%. However, the quantum of funding went up quite a bit as compared to before. So yeah, there's been a lot of additional assistance actually during this time.
Thank you. Thank you both for providing a recap of the schemes available. So the Ministry of Law and the Ministry of Development announced on 12 October that they will be extending the relief period for those who are unable to perform their contractual obligations by one of the 5 months from 19 October, depending on the category of the contract. Samuel, Mustafa, would you care to share your thoughts on this extension?
Sure, I'll just jump in real quick, and then Samuel, I'm sure you know a lot more about this than me, so you can go ahead after that. I believe the relief from legal enforcement is for one month, but up to 4 months for certain industries, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a notification that needs to be made. And last I read, there's something like 7,000 notifications that have already been put forth for this extension. However, for matters of bankruptcy, it still ends at 19th October, if I'm not mistaken. The tourism sector sees an extension of up to 31st December this year. And things like payment of rental arrears up to 5 months for certain classes of property and up to 4 months for commercial and offices and warehouses with an interest cap of 3% if you're paying your rental arrears. However, the first installment must be paid by the 1st of December at the end of this year.
Yeah, and I think that that really reflects the intent and purpose of the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. I think it was Minister for Law K. Shanmugam. Mr. Shanmugam said this. You're looking at economic devastation, businesses destroyed, people's lives ruined. And in such a situation, you don't talk about contracts. You talk about equity, you talk about justice, you talk about what is the right thing to do. Now, I think all along, I've always felt that the act in of itself is a very fine balancing act. It's scary, you know, from a legislator's point of view, and as a lawyer to think about, you know, even, you know, taking away the sanctity of contracts, but it has to be done, right? And as you all know, that the act is this temporary piece of legislation that is really created to allow, to create a space for us to negotiate and to vary contractual obligations as we are being affected by COVID-19. Now, bear in mind that no matter what is being done or what measures are being rolled out, you still have to, for want of a better turn of phrase, pay the piper, right? So it's a question of when you pay. So I think that is something that we need to bear in mind, that with all the extension of the support schemes, we cannot forget that, you know, the sanctity of the contract is the certainty of contract must prevail. And with this in mind, you will find that whatever reliefs you get are intended to be temporary in nature. Once these temporary measures are eventually lifted, I don't know when, but they will be lifted, the existing contractual obligations will resume until the parties have successfully negotiated and agreed to a variation of their contractual obligations. Yeah. Back to you, Abby.
Thanks, Samuel. So what are the other options for those of people who do not fall in the category of reliefs that are extended?
Let me take this one. Now, you'll find that in the Act itself, commercial contracts are sort of exempted. You know, there are some which are, of course, relevant if you are, say, like you have a commercial contract for the use of a hall for a wedding, for example, right? But there are some acts which are which do not fall within or are not connected to construction work, events, or tourism. So these contracts are actually, you know, no surprise, not covered, right? And it becomes then a question of whether the law provides for any protection at all. Now, most of you may have heard of this term called force majeure, which, you know, surprise, surprise, is actually not a part of our contract doctrines, you know. So it's something that has to doesn't occur automatically. It has to be included into your contract. So if you have a force majeure clause in your contract, then it will apply, right? Provided that you have defined it properly. Now, in some cases, you'll find that you do not have a force majeure clause. What do? You rely on the doctrine of frustration. And this is a very factual thing. You know, you have to prove that the way things have gone had frustrated the business so much, okay, to the point where it became impossible or unreasonable for you to fulfill the obligations, right? So when you talk about whether there are any other things that can be done, well, of course, there's always your contractual protection. So a very well-crafted contract will really save your skin at this point in time. Back to you, Abby.
Thanks, Samuel.
I'll just jump in. Sorry, I'll just jump in on a couple of things, a couple of other things that businesses could use, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
So in terms of like support schemes, right? There's a couple of loan programs that businesses could also look at. I'll go through maybe like 3 of them. The first one is particularly for startups. This is more of an investment scheme called the Special Situation Fund for Startups, and this is administered both by EDB and by Enterprise Singapore. It aims to encourage one-to-one matching funding from the private sector with the government for early or late-stage startups both, who are doing well before COVID, but however, due to the situation, they've had to slow things down. So the purpose of this would be to help them keep those innovation activities going during this time. Another option that they could also look at is the enterprise financing scheme. This is good for like working capital, venture debt, trade loans, fixed assets, and criteria would be something like the business must be registered in Singapore, physically present here, 30% local shareholding. Of course, it's still also up to the bank to assess what your books and what your numbers look like also. But these schemes, Enterprise Singapore looks to encourage the banks by sharing about 90% of the risk. There's also a loan insurance scheme which covers things like inventory, factoring, working capital, bank guarantee in the event of insolvency. And there's also a temporary bridging loan program which goes up to 5 million. Again, for 30% locally owned businesses physically present in Singapore. It's important to remember here that for these programs, the bank has to take a look at your documents and your books. As long as you have your house in order, it's very much easier for you to go to a bank and say, hey, I need to borrow this sum of money in order to keep my business running.
That's very helpful and very practical as well. I'm sure a lot of companies would find this very useful. So what happens if SME introduces time banking? Would they still qualify for the schemes? What about the rights of the employees under those circumstances?
Maybe time banking is not really a very common practice in Singapore. So maybe I can just spend a bit of time to explain what it is really. Yeah, so time banking is really you as the employer, you pay your staff, okay, and your staff promises that that they will pay back the hours at a later date. So, for example, you could pay your staff the regular basic salary for the circuit breaker months, and after circuit breaker, you can ask your staff to pay back in terms of working, overtime or without claiming for additional pay. So that's the concept behind time banking. Yeah. So is it legal? That's one question that people always ask about before I pass the time back to Mustafa. And well, surprise, is not exactly illegal. Because at the end of the day, right, when you talk about any employment situation, yes, there are safeguards in place. The Employment Act does say that there are certain minimum standards that you have to keep to. You have to bear in mind that ultimately it is still a willing party situation. Nobody is forcing you into a job or producing labor, because that would be slavery, right? No one can force you, right? But at the end of the day, it is willing parties, okay, willing employer, willing employee, and this represents a variation of the terms of the or terms of employment, and it is not illegal per se. In fact, MOM has actually come out and given implicit support for it, because it is not exactly like, oh, we encourage everyone to do it, but it's more like you do what you have to keep the company afloat. Yeah, Mustafa, what do you think about it?
I think you covered it just nice. Yeah.
Thanks, both. So Now that we have covered the fundamentals of the COVID-19 Act and the schemes that are available, both financial and legal, let's move on to scenarios, hypothetical scenarios that we can, I'm sure that will sound familiar to our guests. So in this scenario, we see John owning a small cafe and a bookstore located within the same unit that John is renting. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19 situations and even the grants and the rental rebates available, he's facing trouble meeting his obligations, including paying his employees, rental and utilities, and simply sustaining the business, particularly due to cash flow problems. Mustafa, could I
Sure.
ask you to chip in, and what are your thoughts about this?
Sure. The first thing I would suggest is to consider a small business model innovation, if possible. I would suggest that he take a look and see where the business can go partially or fully online. It's a small cafe and a bookstore located within the same place. So there's many avenues where this sort of both of these businesses can actually go online without having to do too much of heavy lifting. There's a lot of large what we call e-tailers now, right? Like have Lazada, Carousel, Qten, where a product like books can fit in very nicely. And on the food side of it, you have you have Food Panda, you've got Grab Food, you've got Deliveroo, and probably a few more which are not coming to my mind right now. But even if you're selling a very niche type of food, there's still a market for it. Recently, I was surprised to know that you can even find putu piring on Grab Food, and I was like, wow, okay, so you don't need to go looking around for all your favorite things anymore. You can actually find it really easily. So that's the first suggestion I would make. Secondly, of course, look into the assistance programs from the government. There's many different things to help all kinds of businesses, retailers also, to help them get online, help them get digital, and help them get their products to the market. If any business out there is facing this difficulty, we're very happy to speak to them about it.
Thanks, Mustafa. Those are very practical tips indeed. Samuel, any thoughts?
Yes. In fact, contracts are not entirely set in stone. That it is always possible to what the Hokkien say "cham xiao," to negotiate with the counterparties, right? So in this case, I've heard of instances where landlords were very willing and happy to renegotiate the terms of rentals, payment of rentals with tenants that have been good tenants, right? So that actually had happened from what I heard. But also, what's more interesting right now is other than you taking the initiative to negotiate with your counterparty or with your vendors or your landlords, is the fact that tomorrow we will know whether this act the amendments will pass or not. Chances are they will, right? And what that would do is going to be amazing, because you will have, if you qualify, you may actually go before an assessor from in-law and spend 6 weeks negotiating. That is really a very good pressure relief valve that the government has built into the COVID-19 Act. Yeah, and I think it's going to be very significant. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. And I guess today, on the day that the bill was introduced, we couldn't have picked a better time to talk about issues like this. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's really up to you, in this case, John, to think about how you can negotiate with your vendors, with your employees, and with other stakeholders. There's always a possibility of delaying the payments or delaying gratification, if you will. And ultimately, nobody benefits if the business closes down, right? Nobody. If you're a creditor, you probably will be lucky if you can get back 10 cents to $1, right? Yeah. Back to you, Abby.
So the goal was the survival and thriving and longevity of everybody, right? So a short-term situation like that wouldn't benefit, as you said, wouldn't benefit anybody.
Yeah, you survive the zombie horde a lot better if you're fighting with a lot of people by your side, right, rather than by yourself. Yeah.
That is really true. Very true
Yeah.
indeed. So,
Strength.
just on the point that you had mentioned about this new bill that Parliament had proposed today, now I think might be an opportune time for us to delve a bit more into it. But before we move further into it, just like to remind all our participants that feel free to ask any questions using the chat at the site. Just type in your questions and click send. So, and our panelists can take those questions at any time during the course of this webinar. So today, Parliament had introduced the realign framework, which Samuel had briefly mentioned earlier, which will allow small businesses to terminate their contracts without any penalty if they are able to agree on new terms with the other party. Samuel, would you be able to share a bit more about this new framework, please?
Okay, as a nerdy lawyer, I get very excited when things happen in a very strange way, because this act was actually tabled on an urgent basis. Yeah. And nobody, well, I guess most people didn't know that was coming. I was quite caught off guard by it. But what it seeks to do, okay, is to create a way for small businesses and micro businesses who are affected by COVID-19 to terminate their contracts without penalty. If they are unable to agree on new terms with the counterparties, and this only applies to commercial contracts. Including commercial contracts with the government, right? So this is going to be very interesting. And the details are still being finalized, of course, in consultation with industry leaders. And of course, they will flesh it out more deep, give us more details as we move along. But the purpose of the framework is really to give small and micro businesses some power to renegotiate with their options with counterparties. Now, for contracts to be eligible under the framework, from what I understand to date, is that they must be governed by Singapore law, okay, and they must be entered into before the 25th of March. The magic date keeps popping up, which is basically before the impact of COVID-19 was felt in Singapore in earnest. Now, one of the parties of the contract must also have a place of business in Singapore, meaning to say if you are working with a foreign party and you owe money to the foreign party, this act will kick in to give you that opportunity to renegotiate terms. Now, interestingly enough, these contracts are maybe the government, or rather the act that is, the bill that's being tabled, it's not act yet. The bill that's being tabled covers contracts which may be leases or licenses for non-residential immovable property, okay, for the sale and purchase of goods and services, as well as rental agreements for commercial equipment and commercial vehicles. And this will include hire purchase or conditional sale agreements for commercial equipment and commercial vehicles as well. But do bear in mind, certain contracts are excluded from the framework. And from what I know, up to date, consumer, employment, and insurance contracts are excluded. Yeah, so if this passes, it will be interesting to see how the Ministry of Law is going to administer the act. And of course, as a legal practice, we are braced to answer questions about this. But by and large, it is really going to be something that has to be dealt with by the assessors. Yeah.
Thanks,
Yep.
Samuel.
That's what I can share for now. Yeah.
So let's say, right, we were to use what you have said and apply it to this scenario with John. So he's facing problems meeting his obligations with his employees and businesses and suppliers. So I understand employment contracts will not be covered under this new realign framework. What about the contracts with the suppliers? Would that be considered? Would that be covered?
In all likelihoods, it will be. It seems that it will be covered. Particularly his renegotiation of his agreement with, say, his landlord. And in some cases, say, let's say John is not the owner of a small cafe. Let's say he is a hawker in a food court, right? Typically speaking, right, these food courts issue occupation licenses to the stallholders. So such contracts are likely to be covered under the third round of amendments as well.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much. So let's continue on with a further scenario of John and his cafe. So John is unaware of all these regulations and is conflicted about letting his employees go or putting them on no pay leave. I'm sure many SME business owners are very anxiously and carefully reopening their businesses now, but there are still many companies who cannot sustain the headcount which they were previously operating with. So Mustafa, Samuel, could you guys share with us what are the reliefs that the owners can get for their employees, and also remind owners what they should be mindful of in terms of employment laws? Mustafa, would you like to take the lead in this?
Sure. Over the last couple of months, there's been the job support scheme, the JSS. Of course, there are cases whereby employers have to let employees go. It's something which is unfortunate, but of course, it can't be helped in certain situations. We hope that they will do it correctly with a notice period and everything. Yeah. Samuel, go ahead.
Yeah. I think nobody wants to be in the position where you have to choose who lives and who dies. But if a company can't support that many people, it's also a question of whether splitting the resources amongst everybody is really going to help everyone or anyone, right? If I have $100, am I going to split it 100 ways? It's probably not going to be effective. So in some situation, you find that yes, truly retrenchment is the last resort. And if it has to be done, it has to be done. What needs to be done, however, is to bear in mind that while contractually you are obligated to the employee, the law does allow for retrenchment. Okay. However, it's a very soft. It's not prescriptive. What you do need to do if you are intending to retrench is always to make sure that there is clear communication. Okay. One client actually told me this when he broke the news about retrenchment. None of his employees actually kicked up a fuss because they know how dire the circumstances are. So sometimes we can't assume that other people don't know, or maybe your employees won't understand. I'm sure they will. Okay, it's a matter of communication. Now, if it happens that your employees are unionized, do check with the union leaders, with collective agreements, to make sure that there are provisions for retrenchments, or alternatively sit down with the union across the table and try and work out a solution, right? At the end of the day, this pandemic has affected everyone, right? Everybody. And it would take a very unreasonable person to think that they have a right to enforce their contractual obligations against you, right? But it does happen, but those are few and far between. So if you are unaware of the regulations, then one good place to start is actually with the MOM website, which talks about retrenchment, time banking, and of course other strategies that you can adopt to help you preserve your cash flow in these very strange times, right? Alternatively, if an agreement cannot be met, then of course you do have the right to go, and get it mediated at a tribunal, right? So ultimately, if it really goes to that extent, it does take a bit of time. So please, try to avoid it, because the time that you save is time that you can save to it's time that you can use to save your business. Yeah. So not advisable to go for tribunals if you can help it. And at this point in time, it's really about doing whatever little we can for one another. Yeah.
It's better we all win together, right? So that would be ideal. Yeah.
So like you guys mentioned earlier, it's better we all get out of this together as opposed to being at each other's throats and stepping over each other.
Yep.
So a couple of questions have come in regarding the new bill, the realigned framework that Samuel, that you had mentioned previously. So firstly, are there any limits to the monetary value of the contracts coming in under the new realigned framework?
That has not been discussed open, or rather, the news channels have not talked about it. But what we do know is that you must demonstrate that you are significantly affected. So if you ask me for my own personal opinion, what we have seen so far with the additional rental relief conditions or criteria, that would really represent or be, that would really be the benchmark that you are going for, you see. That you have to show that, demonstrate that you are a small business. What is a small business? We still do not know. But if you go by the Companies Act definition, a small business could mean anyone with 50 employees or less, or it could mean someone or a company that earns less than 10 million in revenue. But again, this is the Companies Act definition. I must stress, it is not the COVID-19 definition. Okay, the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act has a different set of definitions for small businesses. So the only thing I can say is, guys, tomorrow we will know. Yeah, it's a 12-hour wait, but tomorrow we will know. Yeah. So for the moment, no other numbers have been shared through the news channels.
We'll be anticipating to see what happens tomorrow.
Oh yeah, it's like we're bated breath. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone would like to know what is significantly affected and how they can utilize this bill for their benefit. So a number of other questions. Would this new framework cover SMEs renting the industrial space, maybe renting from a private landlord via a property agent or otherwise?
It would seem to cover, but again, not enough information is being shared at this point in time. But you would have to just wait and find out. I'm sorry, I can't I can't share any more on this. But if you look at the Straits Times article online, of course, you'll find that a list of contracts have been listed out. And that really covers contracts which are not covered by the realigned framework. But beyond that, right now they have said that they are still working out on the details with industry leaders. So we just have to be patient. But from what Minister Shanmugam has been messaging to us through the news outlets, you'll find that the government is very keen to explore the idea of justice as opposed to sanctity of contract. As far as possible, it is going to be this very finely tuned balancing act between sanctity of contracts on one hand and the need to have justice on the other. So we just have to trust the government on this, regardless of your political affiliation. I feel that this act is very good for what we are going through, and one can only hope that the third round of amendments will actually cover more businesses than not. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm guessing, we don't have much information right now, but presumably they will touch on whether it will apply to various kind of businesses, be it like industries or heavy industries, and we will know more in the next day or so.
Yeah.
Moving back to the scenario that we are looking at on the John being unaware of regulations and putting his employees on no pay leave. Mustafa, have you been seeing similar cases about this or anything related to that coming in for the SME Center? And how can the SME Center render support?
So yeah, we do see stuff like this from, I would say not like a huge number of them, but a couple of them. Um, how we can render support is that we can explore different options that the business can take. Let's say, for example, um, if you hopefully decide to keep your business running, we can help, look at a couple of different ways that you can smoothen it out. Perhaps look at some kind of automation, look at some kind of financing programs or something that can help you both in your processes to make it easier so that you'll maybe have to rely on less manpower moving forward, and also something to smoothen out your cash flow. Because I see it as, this problem is sort of bottlenecking both of these areas in your business. So that's something we'd be very happy to explore with any business which has come to this kind of a crunch. Yeah, very happy to talk about it.
Thanks, Mustafa. Thanks, Samuel. So let's continue on with John and his scenario. So John needs to open both his cafe and a bookstore in order to remain viable. However, as we know, the government has mentioned cross-mingling is not allowed. So John will have to employ two different groups of employees, one to manage the bookstore and one to manage the cafe. He also needs to ensure clear demarcation between the two businesses, even though they're located within the same premises. So how should he go about doing that? Say you have a group of friends who are seated at the cafe, and then they meet another group of friends reading some books, browsing through the bookstores. What should the employers do in those situations? How should they manage this kind of situations?
I'll just jump in on this one really quickly for like a minute or so. Of course, cross mingling is not allowed. Even if you're 10 people from the same party, there's no intermingling. I've seen situations where restaurants are even not keen to give you a table if you're more than 5 people. So if you ask for 2 sets of 3, they'll say no, sorry, we can't do that. For his staff, what he can do is he can look at split teams, right? So half of his team coming in on one day and the other half coming on the other day, or even one team coming in for a week and another team coming in for the next week, or even staggered working hours. Another thing that he could also do is he could deploy one of those automated temperature checking machines also, which I think are really, really useful and very, very relevant today. So that you don't need to have somebody there checking the temperature. I would also say that safe check-in is definitely a must. That's a non-negotiable. That's really, really important. And of course, I'm going to give the shout out as usual. Always look at how you can take your business online to make it smoother, better, faster, and less manpower reliant.
And if I may jump in here, Mustafa, I can't agree more. The Chinese word for crisis is 危机, and it's a combination of 2 Chinese characters, danger and opportunity. So I like to tell my friends, and in fact, people tell me this as well, that there is always opportunity in danger. Yeah, and in our context, there's always an opportunity. There are always opportunities in the pandemic. And for John, what I would really ask him to explore is find a way to go online. Yeah, find a way to reach beyond the cafe. It could be temporary. It could be the new normal. We do not know yet. But what we do know is that if you are able to reach out, you can at least bring in close to 20 or 30% of your regular revenue. So that is money in the pocket, money in the bank, better than not having, right? So going online is important because there is always that physical limitation on the amount of space you can have in a cafe. Yeah. I mean, don't break the rules, guys. The last thing you want is to be mentioned in the national dailies and to be suspended. Yeah.
And we've done so well so far, right? So yeah.
What are the penalties that the employer would face if there's cross mingling or the employees do not abide by safe distancing rules or the guests don't follow? Samuel, would you
I
be
believe
able
there's
to?
sorry, go ahead, Samuel. I believe there's a fine if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure how much it is, but I believe there's a fine, and I think there's some instances where restaurants have been asked to shut as well.
Yeah. Definitely, even for offices other than restaurants, right? There is this stop work order, okay, which basically is tantamount to a suspension. And of course, we have heard in the news about all these stop orders have been issued to restaurants as well. Now, the penalties, on the other hand, I think it depends on the severity, and it depends on whether you are a repeat offender or not. But right now, the whole point really is try not to do this, because other than the monetary penalty, you are endangering the lives of the people that are patronizing your shop. So it is a tough decision, to be honest. It is not enviable. I cannot imagine myself being put in this position. But for those who are, it's really a matter of, doing what's right, not just for your business, but also for the community at large. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah.
be safe for yourself and for those who patronize your business. And no amount of money is worth putting either yourself or other people in harm. So yeah.
Very true indeed. Mustafa, you just going back to what you have mentioned earlier. You mentioned that there was some grants for temperature taking and the implementation and all that. Could you elaborate more about this?
Sure. The Productivity Solutions Grant, we call it PSG for short. Enterprise Singapore has shortlisted, pre-approved vendors for this particular equipment, and the funding is, I believe, up to 80% if a business were to deploy this at its premises.
Thank you about that. So both of you guys have mentioned about how businesses should move online and should try as much as possible to do so. Are there any resources that they can tap on to help them to automate their businesses or to move it more in make it digital?
Other than the schemes which are available, as Mustafa have mentioned earlier, I feel that a large resource that each of us have is actually within ourselves. I know it sounds very corny and very cliche, but we should not underestimate our ability to be resilient and to think outside of the box. Yeah, I noticed that when the circuit breaker first came in, some of my restaurant owner friends, of course, they were a bit shell shocked. So you see that for a couple of days there were no news, and what really heartened, or to borrow a very popular phrase these days, warmed the cockles of my heart, was that they really put themselves together, worked out deals with independent dispatchers, set up their websites very quickly, and got news out there. In fact, there is this Facebook group that was set up just to help hawkers find business. So they take turns to showcase their dishes, to put up discounts. Everything was conducted over WhatsApp. So we shouldn't underestimate our own ability to be resilient, and give yourself, or trust yourself a bit more. That you have that confidence. Give yourself the confidence to see through this. The plans are all there, the strategies are by now, quite clear how you should do or what you should do to survive. It's a matter of carrying it out with resolve. All in, guys. You don't tackle with 1 foot, you 2 foot, 2 foot tackle. That, be committed to it, okay? And it might be tough right now, but I'm sure that in the days to come, it will yield dividends. Yeah. Or at least until the pandemic is over.
Thank you. So moving on to the cross-linkage and how businesses are responsible for their employees. So how can businesses protect themselves from staff that won't like when they are working from home arrangements?
This is quite a question for HR to answer. At this end, you have to trust your employee. right? You have to trust that they are there, to do what they are paid to do, yeah, and that they are going to be responsible. They are not going to expose themselves to danger or take unnecessary risks. Yeah, but what can I say? Contractually, you might be able to have include a clause that says that you are not supposed to moonlight. But in reality, how do you police that, right? So I feel that your HR must be on top of things. You must have a understanding with your employees as to what they can or cannot do.
Yeah, and I think, sorry.
Mustafa, I was going
I
to
think,
ask you, have you seen any such cases coming in at the SMEs, and how can
no, thankfully no, but I think that regulatory wise, if the employee is on some sort of a visa, then I think it's a bit more complicated versus if they're Singaporean or PR. If you're a Singaporean or PR, then it's more of an HR matter. But
Yeah.
if you're holding some sort of a visa, then it's a regulatory or legal matter. Yeah, because you're not allowed to moonlight. Yeah.
But you are absolutely right. If you are holding a work pass or employment pass or special pass, maybe don't do it. Yeah.
So if they are holding such passes, what can the employers do? How can the employers put in place any safeguards to protect themselves if their foreign staff moonlights and does something that they're not supposed to do on their work passes?
Okay.
So I understand. Go ahead,
Sorry,
Samuel.
Mustafa, after you. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that if you're on a work permit or an employment pass or S pass, your employment in Singapore is tagged specifically to that one employer. So you're not allowed to moonlight or offer your services anywhere else.
Yep, that's absolutely true. There are certain exemptions. Exceptions is, for example, if you are seconded by your employer to work in a wholly owned subsidiary. That is entirely possible. Say for a restaurant scenario, let's say for John, he owns both the cafe and the bookstore, 100%. So it may be possible to be transferred from the cafe to the bookstore and vice versa. But if the employer is aware and he deliberately second you to an unrelated company, then the employer is in breach as well. However, if the employer is unaware that the staff has, outside of office hours, gone on to moonlight, to do stuff or to give tuition or whatnot. So if that person is holding a work pass, then of course, like what Mustafa correctly pointed out, it would actually be a contravention of the work pass conditions. Yeah, so you could be sanctioned for it. Worst case scenario, you may be deported.
So to what extent can the employer ask or question his employees about what his work from home arrangements are like, whether he's moonlighting, to the extent that it's not intrusive on their own privacy and personal space, but to also consider that they have discharged their own due diligence and it's not willfully blind to the situation?
I hear you. This is something which has to be answered by each company, because the mix-up, the makeup and the composition of personalities is always going to be different. If all along, your work pass holder is very clear about in his communication with you, then rightfully there really should not be any cause for concerns. Yeah, but of course it is really very factual. If you have any doubt, then do bear in mind that this is something that has to be done in conjunction with your HR. As to the kind of questions that can be asked, at the end of the day, what do you really need to know? That they confirm with you that they are not moonlighting. So perhaps that is the question that ought to be asked, right? Simple point blank, are you moonlighting? So that could be one question. But after that, if you choose to disbelieve or you have reasons to disbelieve what has been shared, then perhaps for the sake of completeness, or maybe just to make sure that you are erring on the side of caution, dig a little bit deeper. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's not we don't really have that kind of privacy laws, especially between in the employer-employee situation, which prevents you from asking that sort of questions. But do bear in mind, at some point, it can come across as a bit harassing. Yeah. So perhaps speak with sensitivity, check with your HR as to what they believe is the best way forward. Yeah.
Thanks, Samuel. So another question on employment matters. If let's say an employer decides to terminate the staff for poor performance, how does the employer ensure that the staff does not then counterclaim for retrenchment benefits?
Well, let me address this because I came across a couple of cases. You can't really stop someone for exploring whether he has that legal right or not. Yeah, certainly our legal system doesn't prevent that. So unfortunately, these things do happen. When you terminate a staff for poor performance, the staff may choose to believe that there are other reasons, like maybe you did not say good morning. He did not say good morning to you, and therefore he's getting fired. If he has reason to believe that there had been a retrenchment exercise, then again, you have to look at a factual situation. If honestly it is a retrenchment disguised as a poor performance, then of course, your ticket's up at some point, and you might be sanctioned for it. So what typically happens is that the employee, if they have reason to believe that there had been an unfair dismissal, or maybe there had been other reasons for the dismissal, they would bring it to the MOM tribunal, right? And that is where the tribunal will try to facilitate a mediation between the parties, the employer and the ex-employee, and try to come to a settlement. Yeah. But honestly, whether you can prevent it or not, I would say not really. But you can reduce the incidence of such things by having clear communication. Now, what does that mean? It means that the way you bring across the termination, you have to be sensitive to the kind of pressures that the employee might be feeling. For all you know, that employee might be the sole breadwinner, right? So be sensitive, right? Empathize with the staff that's getting sacked, even if it's not for retrenchment. Just being sacked for poor performance. Make sure that you have exhausted every possible option to help that person improve his performance. If everything has been, you've done everything in your power to help him improve, and he is not getting it, maybe because you're asking an elephant to climb a tree, then move on, right? Be very clear with the way you communicate, and of course bring HR in so that it can be done properly. Okay, do it in accordance with the provisions set out in your handbook. Okay, make sure that whatever performance coaching exercise you're supposed to do, you have done it already. Yeah. So once you have done all these, yes, sorry.
Sorry, on that note, please go ahead and finish. I'll ask you after that.
I was about to say that, once you have done all these things, even if the ex-employee has brought a case before the MOM tribunal, it would be very clear that there was no hidden agenda, there was no retrenchment. Yeah. Sorry, Mustafa.
Is it necessary to document every time, let's say you counsel an employee and say, okay, your performance is not up to standard, how can we help you to do better? Is it necessary to have all of these dates and times and sort of minutes of those interactions down?
Yeah, in fact, if there's one thing I learned in the NS and in legal practice, it's always leave a paper trail. Yeah, very important. cannot underestimate or overemphasize it.
Very good advice indeed. Another question has just come in. What if the businesses is not able to survive even with the relief measures? Should the owner decide to wind up the company or leave it to the creditors to take action?
I think that's a very broad question to ask, and I don't suppose I know the facts of the case, but generally speaking, if your creditors are chasing after you, you have to discuss with them as to how you intend to repay. And hopefully, if the third round of amendments are passed in the bill tomorrow, then it becomes clearer, right? Then you might have an avenue to stave off, winding up the business or liquidation, right? But I would really at this point ask that maybe you might want to discuss this with your legal counsels, or maybe seek the advice of a liquidation expert, be they accountants or lawyers, so that they can advise you further and better, specific to your situation.
Thanks, Samuel. Moving back to the would you be able to share a bit more on the difference between winding up and bankruptcy?
Winding up and bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is usually, used in the context of an individual. Winding up is more for a company. And usually the winding up situation presupposes, but it's not always the case. It presupposes that you are insolvent. Bankruptcy, on the other hand, is a question of you not being able to pay back your debts as they fall due beyond a certain threshold. I believe it's 150,000 at this point in time. But it's quite difficult to be made a bankrupt in Singapore. Once a claim has been filed, you go for Thursday morning court sessions at the High Court, and they, for first timers, there's always a DRS that will be arranged. That's that restructuring scheme to help you pay back whatever is owed. But for winding up, it really depends on the situation, because there are many forms and manner in which it can be done. So do speak with your litigation experts on this, or for the liquidator, with accountants or auditors who are also liquidators. You speak with them.
Thanks, Samuel. Mustafa, from any practical advice from the SME perspective, do you see such cases where the businesses might not be able to survive? What should they do?
I would say that it would definitely be easier on the business owner to do whatever needs to be done voluntarily, versus having being litigated against, and having to go through that kind of unpleasant experience.
Thanks,
of course, try your best not to get into that kind of trouble.
Of course, we should always try to avoid litigation where possible. Moving back onto the moonlighting issue, what if the employer has asked the employee to take a much lower salary for the time being, given the whole situations, and the employee is not able to make ends meet with this lower salary? So why can't the employee moonlight?
Well, it really depends on the path that you're on, or for the matter, your nationality, right, and your residency status. If you are a PR or a Singapore citizen, then of course it's a question of contract, whether in the course of your moonlighting you are actually hurting the interests of the company, or whether you are doing something which is in of itself illegal. Like, say someone engages you to go around HDB blocks spraying O dollar, P dollar, on the walls, So, it is really a question of law and contract, right? But if you are a pass holder, then clearly you should not be doing it because it is contrary to the conditions set out for you when you have when you qualified for your pass and when the pass was granted to you. Yeah.
Yep.
There
And
was
just
sorry, there was an article in the newspaper, I think a couple of weeks ago, that said employers asked to, can't remember what the terminology was, but sort of asked to work together with the employees to do part-time work externally to make up any shortfall in their salary that had happened over the last couple of months. There was an article on that, if I recall correctly, that for certain types of businesses where the staff have been affected a lot, that for employers to help them or work together with them to allow them to make up the shortfall externally wherever possible.
Yeah, and yes, actually there was a guideline issued by the Ministry of Manpower on this, where say if you are unable to support the employee with work, you are supposed to or you are encouraged to reduce the work hours so that the employees may take on a second job. But this is the implied legality of it is really that the employer and employees agree to vary their terms of employment. Yeah. So of course, in a situation where the employees and the employers have agreed that, hey, we are going to reduce your hours so that you go find another job elsewhere, right? That would have constituted a variation of your terms of employment. But if the employer says, no, I need you here, I'm gonna pay you 20% less, but I need you here, but you don't turn up and you run off and maybe work as a Grab delivery, right, or whichever, right, or go to the rivals company to work, So that would actually be on you, right? For want of a better turn of phrase, you will be responsible for your own actions because that there was no agreement. Yeah. And one of the MOM's they gave some key principles. The first employer, right? You are responsible for their salary, CPF contributions, and statutory and contractual benefits, which may be prorated. Yeah. For the period where the employees are working for their second employer, you are not responsible for any contractual or statutory obligations. So this means that the second employer, okay, for the periods where they are scheduled to work for you as a second employer, you are responsible for fulfilling the key terms and conditions specified in the employment contract. Okay, so you are encouraged to provide the employees with sick leave entitlement, medical benefits, even though the employment duration may be less than 3 months. Yeah. So here, just some of the guidelines that MOM has put up regarding this moonlighting situation.
That's helpful. But I would presume that this would only work for, and the variation of terms will only work for Singaporeans or PRs, because if you are on a work pass, then the terms of your work is specified in your work pass, so you can't actually vary it.
Yeah, that would be logical. But again, if there's any doubt or if you require, if any of our audience require further clarification, do speak with MOM. Find out from them what is the current situation, because as this pandemic it rages on, the situation evolves from day to day. So I know that legally you're not supposed to, okay, but who knows? Maybe things might change. In fact, but don't quote me on this, okay? But when the circuit breaker period first started, MOM actually told employees that, if you are going to not pay your employment pass holders or work pass holders the full salary that you're supposed to, please let us know. You see, so I can personally vouch for you that MOM is not staffed by robots. They are like you and me, made of flesh and blood and bones, with a beating heart. So they know the situation out there. They are not unempathetic, So speak with them and ask for guidance. Yeah.
Thanks, Samuel. To all our participants, please do keep the questions coming in. So for now, we'll just move back to John and our scenario with John. Now that he has reopened his cafe and bookstore and is running the businesses, and say the grants are no longer available for him, what does his future look like?
Okay, I'll take this. Sorry, Samuel, do you want to go ahead?
No, you please. You go first.
Okay. Sure. I mean, I would encourage that he look to automate as much of his business as he can, ease up his working capital as much as he can, so that there's no there's nothing holding him back now that he's getting back into the market, getting back into business. Try to reduce his manpower reliance so that everything can go smoothly in terms of his business processes, in terms of his cash flow. Look at how to get your business out to new customers. I'll say it again. Look at online business and see how you can not only get online but do that in the best possible way.
Yeah, and just to jump on to what Mustafa has shared, cash flow is king. And I'm speaking as a fellow business owner rather than as a legal practitioner here. Make sure, at some point the subsidies are going to end. Not just because it's COVID related, but at any point in time. There was a time where there was this thing called PIC, right? It's no longer in effect, right?
Yeah.
So we should not, as far as possible, run our business on the promise that, there will be a grant available. The grants to me ought to be like, icing on the cake. The cake must still be there, right? A cake cannot be just icing and nothing else, right? So we have to take it in perspective. You have to have sound fundamentals for your business. Ask yourself, are you paying for any inefficiencies? Is there dead weight or dead wood in the company's processes or personnel that maybe you ought to clear out, right? Is your business model even viable? Yeah, of course, do speak with a business consultant or loan specialist to find out how you can ensure your cash flow and of course to build a stronger business. But this period of time is really just an amplification of the stresses that business owners go through in under normal circumstances. And of course it's going to hurt, but the fundamentals are still there, right? At the end of the day, cash flow is king. Yeah, so do what you can to ensure that you have a proper cash flow. Go for networking for all that matters. Go networking, go find other sources of revenues, or business. Yeah.
One of the things that we do in the SME Center is that we run certain diagnostic tools for businesses. So it could be in terms of productivity, HR, marketing, finance, and this helps us learn more about the businesses. And many times when we do it, business owners realize things about their own business that they hadn't thought about before. So we ask them certain questions about their revenue, how much they spend on certain things, their processes, and how they do certain things, and really the ins and outs which they might not have even noticed before. So this is one way we help businesses boost the productivity and really get more out of their business by hopefully spending less resources and doing more with it.
Thank you. Mustafa, you mentioned your SME Center runs some diagnostic tools. Will you be able to elaborate a bit more about that?
Sure. They typically take about, I would say, about 1 to 2 hours typically to do per business. We'll sit down with a business owner and we'll ask them a series of questions about, depending on the diagnostic, but typically it's about about their revenue, about how many people they employ, about their different processes, about whether they're meeting certain standards or certain guidelines that are set out. This allows us to make certain recommendations for that business, and ultimately it helps that business have its house better in order for their own functioning. And in the future, if they're looking to expand, if they're looking to get investments externally, or if they're looking to get money from banks, all of these things eventually help the business in their longevity.
Yep. One other
And
option that sorry, just jumping in. One other option that you can look into is also to consider looking for investors to come on board as well. Do a private equity, maybe you just dispose of some of your shares in your company, bring in investors to help inject some cash into the company. Why not, right? If you can find someone that is aligned with you, do it.
Thanks, both. Just to wrap up, are there any advice that you both can give to businesses out there who are trying their best to survive during this pandemic?
Come and talk to us at the SME Center. We sometimes put forth certain ideas or something that the business owner may not have thought about before. Certain tools, certain assistance. Of course, it's not always about about incentives from the government. Sometimes it's just about strategy. It could be about thinking of different ways to do things. So we're very happy to help in many different ways. So come and talk to us. Yeah, we're here. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say as far as possible, resist the urge to give up. Okay, don't give in to fear and panic. Go talk to Mustafa. He might be able to help you. Legal issues, you consult with your lawyers, and they might be able to maybe just illuminate your path a bit more. But at day's end, don't give up so easily. These are strange times for all of us. But nobody has a monopoly on the secret for surviving this period of time. It's out there. All it takes is for you to just give it a shot. Yeah.
Thanks, Samuel. There's another question that came in about the diagnostic testing that the SME Center does. They would like to know what's the cost for it. Is it free, or how does the SME arrange for this meetup? And are there any criteria for whether they qualify for this diagnostic testing?
There's no criteria. You can drop us an email at the SME Center. Our SME Center is SME Center at the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You can look us up online. We're very easy to find. We have a presence at 31 Stanley Street as well as in Little India Arcade. Drop us a line, set up an appointment with us, and we'll go from there. There's no cost involved.
Thank you. So I guess that was a very informative session. There is a QR code for people to link them to, for you guys to be linked to the website. So you might just want to take a look at that. As we bring our sessions to the close, just a gentle reminder to everyone to download the useful resources regarding the issues that we have discussed today. Again, these can be found at the files on your screen. So the QR code should be on your screen right now. Please take some time to scan them and look through the website. We hope you found our webinar on small businesses in a crisis useful. For more information on the COVID-19 laws and how to navigate them, please visit COV8 at www.nus-cov8.com or scan the QR code in the box that says COV8. This is a website created by a group of NUS law students who saw the need to support the community. And if you are interested in the diagnostic testing for SMEs that Mustafa had mentioned, please scan the QR code on the right of your screen with the box that says SME at SICCI. So thank you both, Samuel and Mustafa, for spending the evening with us. This session was brought to you by a combination of organizations. So if you'd like to know more about legal services and Law Society pro bono services, please scan the QR code right in the middle box. So on behalf of Law Society Pro Bono Services, we thank you for joining us today and have a great day.
Thank you so much. Have an awesome day ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Abigail, Mustafa. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you both. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.